This is Good Morning Mumbai with Hrishi K.
I'm very pleased to welcome into studio Shaheen Bhatt, whose book I've really enjoyed reading cover to cover. Wonderful to see you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
I have to say this, and I hope that both Alia and your lovely mother will clarify. Some of the most enjoyable conversations I've had in studio are with your mom
Oh, really?
and with Alia, and of course with Bhatt Saab, who I have this whole Krishnamurti bonding with.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
he'll walk into the studio and the first 15 minutes are just about Krishnamurti.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
And then we talk about other
Oh,
stuff.
wow, I did not know that.
But I love it because the fact that you've been so candid about most things in your life, and how you've said that this is something that can afflict anybody. I mean, it's like it could be like the common cold, it could be like the flu, but you have to go and get treatment for it. And I want to start at the point where there's this photo shoot with your sisters, which is Pooja Bhatt as well as Alia, which kind of was the pivot for turning things around, and actually a beautiful pivot because it made you realize a lot of things. So just tell radio audiences about that, please.
Well, I don't know if it was a pivot particularly for my depression. I think it was just a pivot for one facet of what I focused on, which was my self-image and my body and my, the crux of it is that we were at a photo shoot, and I was asked to step out of frame. And the photographer just wanted my sisters in frame and not me because I didn't look very much like them. I don't think it was, that's the thing for me. I think it was one facet which it sort of sparked, which was a profound sense of unhappiness with my body.
And there's a wonderful part in the book which I really identify with. Everybody is going to take little bits and nuggets off the book and allow me to have my own. Where you say that, that being overweight is something that that deeply affects you, and then instead of doing something positive about it, you go and eat more, and that really resonates with me. I'm really body conscious, and there are lots of times that I will turn around and I'll say, oh my God, and I'm not looking nice, and I'm not looking okay, and I'm doing this selfie on Instagram, and the chin and this and that, and then I'll just go and pig out again.
Yeah.
And was that another important aspect of you realizing what you're going through?
Yeah, definitely, because that's kind of where it's one of the external symptoms I had, which was, aside from the fact that I stopped sleeping, is I started eating crazy amounts of food. And no matter how much I ate, it just didn't feel like it was enough. And so even now when I have low bursts, for me that's one of the hardest things to control is the way I eat. And it still happens to me. I'm a binge eater. I'm an emotional eater. So I eat when I feel sad. I feed the sad feelings with carbs and sugar. I think a lot of us do it to a certain extent, but I think obviously some people do it considerably more. I'm one of those people.
So how does one, tackle it? Does one do what you did, which is go seek professional advice, or would you say start off with some meditation in the beginning and then go seek some professional advice? How does it work?
I think if you have access to professional help, obviously that is always the first step, because professionals are the best equipped to guide you, to sort of tell you whether you need more help, whether how you can go about it. But if you don't have access to professional help, I'd say the first thing to do is talk to someone. Because I think we live in a day and an age where for some reason we're very hyper connected, but we're also the least connected we've ever been. We don't talk to each other. We don't we don't talk about things that matter. So I think the first thing to do is find someone that you trust and you feel like will understand you, and talk to them, and see what that does. Very often you'll find that makes a huge difference, a bigger difference than you thought it could possibly make.
And you've been so candid, it's shockingly candid, and talk about how you took some pills and tried to wash it down with vodka. And I know it sounds really trivial, but it's actually a very comic moment in the book where you turn around and say, you couldn't die because you were overcome with the feeling of wanting to throw up.
Yeah, it's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. Thankfully.
What was the drug? What was the drug you took?
Tylenol PM.
Yeah.
It just washed out a bunch of Tylenol PM with vodka, and thankfully it just made me throw up for about a good 45 minutes. I think that's the funny thing about life, right? It's tragedy and comedy just sort of live side by side and they coincide. So for me, it was a very tragic moment, but with some very real comedy as well, deeply embedded in it.
And it is not a secret that your dad grappled with his own alcoholism. And there's one beautiful moment where you say that he actually looked at you as a baby, he held you in his arms, and you looked away, and that was the end of his alcoholism, yeah?
Yeah, he stopped drinking. It was just a couple of days after I was born. He lifted me up, and the smell of alcohol in his breath was too much for me. I was a newborn, so I turned my face away. And he said that rejection from my child, I couldn't bear my own child rejecting me like that. And he never touched alcohol again. So that was 32 years ago. He's completely stopped cold turkey.
Wow. And in that aspect, you look at him, and I just briefly mentioned Krishnamurti. He was also a follower of Osho at one point in time. So in that aspect, through all the mayhem, there was also a fair amount of spirituality and then rationalism, as it were. And then your mom, who you clearly say is like the rock, was always there. Stuff that you've imbibed from both your parents, I'm very keen to know.
Well, I think all my sense of like pragmatism and rationality comes from my mother, for sure. My mother is a really she's exactly what I say in the book. She's the ultimate stabilizer. My father, not so much. My father, stable is not a word that I'd use to describe my father. He's a lot of things. I think my father and I have had very similar experiences with our emotional states. When he read my book, he said that just after reading your book, I've realized I've been depressed my whole life. I just didn't realize it. I didn't have a name for it. So my father and I've had very similar experiences our whole life. So I think from him, there's a profound sense of understanding that we share between the two of us. And a lot of my lessons I've mentioned him a lot in the book as well, because a lot of my lessons on depression and how to deal with it have come from him. My mother has always been for me she's where I go when I need stability. She's where I go. She's the one who sent me to a psychiatrist, made sure that I had a doctor to go to. So I've gotten different but similar things from the two of them.
And it's crazy. It's like your dad says, some of us would read the book and say, hey, I've been like this through most of my life. Like, for example, you graphically describe a panic attack. And most of us would have something like that and say, oh, it's acidity. Or, I'm just feeling a little ghabarahat and things like that. So what is your advice to people who feel that? First and foremost, describe, what happens in the making of a panic attack, so that everybody who's listening today at least knows that they are having one.
Well, for me, I had a panic attack the first time when I was at a salon. And I felt the simplest way to describe it is I thought I was dying. Suddenly I thought I was dying. My vision got completely distorted. I couldn't see. I got tunnel vision. Everything around me sort of became really out of focus. My heart started beating incredibly fast, to the point where I was convinced I was having a heart attack. I started feeling nauseous. My hands and feet went numb. I suddenly felt like I was not really in my body anymore. I felt like I was kind of, disassociated from my body. I couldn't really make sense of, any of the physical sensations that I was going through. And so for me, has always felt like I'm having a heart attack or there's something physically wrong with me. And I've had the thing where I've gone to the emergency room at 2 o'clock in the morning, for months on end, to the point where the emergency room, the nurses knew me and they would bring out machines to check my heart to assure me that I was not having a heart attack. So it feels very real. I think panic attack is kind of a very reductive term to use, because it's very real. You feel like there's something physically wrong with you.
Also small things like, social anxiety. A lot of us, and people would laugh if I said this to them, because, my entire life over the last 2 decades has been on the mic, and it's such a public profession. And but there are times when I'm in my bedroom and I don't want to go out to the living room because I have exactly that. Not because it's a one-off day, but it's just that there are some unknown people who I'm a little cagey about just conversing with.
I'm the same.
Which is ridiculous, and I'm supposed to be in a profession which is radio, where I converse with all kinds of people all the time. So social anxiety, it's
huge, no? And I think there's more people that are grappling with social anxiety now than ever before. And I'm exactly the same way. My sister actually makes she's always like, it's funny because when there's people over, she's like, your little head will poke out of the room, and as soon as you see people, it'll whip back inside immediately. Like eyes will go wide and you scurry away. Because for me, talking to people is, it's hugely anxiety provoking. It's not something that I find easy to do at all. And even in doing with the press for this book, I've had to talk to a lot of people, which for me has been very. It's been nerve-wracking. I had to actually, when I finished launching the book, I had to stop and say, listen, I can't do anything. I can't talk to anyone. I need 10 days where I cannot, because I physically can't do it. It was making me so anxious.
Also, it's not the kind of interview that you can just do with any journalist. Not the ones who want to know about your sister, for example, or the ones that want to give you a fake solace.
I think
both of whom I'm sure you can see through like a knife.
I think the issue with this is because strangely, it's a strange thing to say, having written a book about myself, but my purpose for writing a book was never to talk about myself. It's a very strange thing to say, having written a book about myself, but for me it's always been a vehicle to tell a larger story, which is we're all in pain, which is everyone's grappling with something. We're all in pain in our own various ways, and we need to start talking about it. So for me, just having to talk about myself continuously, because obviously the book being about me, my product then is myself. I'm talking about myself in every interview that I'm doing, which is for me a very, very hard thing to do. It's not an easy thing for me to do.
So the fact that you ended up writing it, did your dad keep nudging you in that direction?
Not at all.
Or was it just you?
Not at all. This all has come from an Instagram post that I did in 2016, which was I was having a bad day and I posted about the fact that I was having a bad day. And I wrote a couple of articles about it after that, and that's Penguin approached me. My publishers approached me directly and asked me whether I would like to. And I've always been so incredibly adamant that it's very important to talk about these things, that if somebody's offering me the chance to, I've had to take it. So I didn't even discuss it with my family. It's not, it was not a point of discussion. I just said, absolutely, I'll do it.
And did you set yourself a discipline, saying that every day I'm going to be sitting at the laptop for this amount of time, or was it just like I'm going to write when it comes to me?
So I've become a more disciplined writer as time has gone by. I used to be a very chaotic writer, but I have a system in place where I wake up at 5 in the morning and I write from 5 o'clock in the morning to noon. But with this, it was a little hard because I would write a couple of hours and then I would sometimes be so drained from it that I could not write for a week after that. Because I was revisiting things I didn't, they were not comfortable to revisit, and there was a lot. It's emotionally draining also because you have so much understanding and insight that I was gaining while I was doing it. I was learning so much about myself because I had to forcibly go back. That I had to very often sit with what I was learning. I had to process it. It was very intensive therapy for me at the end of the day.
And you very clearly talk about the difference between depression and anxiety, and I'd like you to tell our listeners that, please.
So the simplest way that I can describe it is that depression is pain, anxiety is fear. Anxiety is a constant and pervasive sense of fear. And a lot of people I know, again more than ever, are dealing with some form of anxiety, whether it's general anxiety, whether it's panic attacks. For a lot of people I know, that anxiety is just a constant and pervasive dread of the future and worry that things are going to go wrong, and things are, it's very all-consuming and it's paralyzing. And panic attacks are an offshoot of that. It's a different version. For me, I have very severe health anxiety. So for me, every time there's something wrong with my body, I go into a dizzy, I go into panic. I'm a hypochondriac in a way. I really worry about my physical well-being. So yeah, the simplest way I can describe it is anxiety is fear and depression is pain.
A lot of Western psychiatrists, stroke psychologists turn around and lay blame at the doorstep of the parents. And what I like is, except at minor points where you say, almost laughingly saying that I have these alcoholic genes and I shouldn't be drinking and things like that. You haven't really said, oh my God, my parents are warped and that's why I am the way I am. And did it ever come up during therapy that they make you revisit your past and deal with that and things
absolutely.
like that?
Look, we're all products of our environment. We're all products of the two things, nature and nurture. Nature are your genes, nurture is the way that you've been brought up. the way you've been brought up is also not limited to just your family. It's your schooling. It's where the people you grew up around, and we're all warped. You can't turn out your parents and say you're everywhere. All of us are warped, and all parents are going to pass on some of that unique warpedness to their children. It's natural.
And especially with firstborns like you and me, there's no manual on the right way to bring up a child.
Exactly. It's trial and error. It's trial and error. You see, you give it a shot, you see what happens, and
So it looks as though you forgave them very early on.
yeah, I mean, there's a very famous comedian, I can't remember. It's like, you do your best and you go like, oh, irreversible damage done there, can't do anything about it, let's move on. I mean, you have to, you don't have a choice. We will do it to our own children, someday. It's a natural thing, but I think it's unfair to place blame on anyone in particular. It's not, it's no one's fault.
I like the fact that, I don't know if it's a publisher's idea or your idea, that the chapters begin with your handwritten notes. So was that something that you were keen on right from the beginning, or it happened later?
Yeah, it was. It was my idea. So I've kept a diary since I was 12. So I've a stack.
You write in caps?
I write in caps, like my father. Strangely, I write in all caps.
The British would not be very happy with that, because they think that if you write in caps, you're being screamed at, or you're screaming at people.
Screaming at people, yeah, no. So basically, I'm screaming through all my journal entries are just me screaming. But I write. I know it's also because my handwriting in cursive is appalling. So I don't like the way it looks, and I like the way things look on paper. I'm very visual that way, so I need things to look nice. But for me, it was the easiest way to show and not tell. Because it's one thing to go back in hindsight and say, when I was 13, this is what I went through. It's a different thing to show you, this is something I wrote when I was 13, when I was going through that. So I was quite keen on having the journal entries there, because I felt it was the easiest way for me to sort of make the point of what it's like when you're going through something.
What's the tattoo there? I mean, if you could just hold it out to the camera, I really like it. What is it supposed to symbolize?
This is a Tudor rose. I'm obsessed with medieval British history. It's a strange tidbit about me. Medieval British history, particularly the reign of Henry VIII.
Oh, wow.
This is a Tudor rose, and Henry VIII was Henry Tudor, and so this is the sigil or the symbol of their house, basically.
And what are some of the other tattoos that you've got?
So I have about 10 tattoos now. I have one on my ankle that says live, which this is my most latest tattoo, which it's just a reminder for myself. There's a line that I really like by a philosopher called Virgil, which says, death twitches my ear, live, he says, I'm coming. So for me, this is a kind of a carpe diem without carpe diem. It's just a reminder to make the most of life and live my life to the fullest. And then I have a lot of other tattoos. I've got a question mark here. I've got a lot of different.
Did it help during your phases of being depressed or things like that? Did they help?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice things to look at. Distracting, or tear will fall. I'm like, oh, okay, that's nice. I got some art.
There's also this guy that you quote a lot, Andrew something.
Andrew Solomon.
Andrew Solomon. You're really influenced by his works, obviously.
So his book is called The Noonday Demon. It's an atlas on depression is what the book is called, and it is pretty much the major text that I used as a reference point, because it's so incredibly thorough. It is so detailed, and it talks about everything, depression, statistics, everything that you need is in that one book. And I was very profoundly hit by a lot of the things that he said in the book. So for me, it was sort of my Bible in a way while I was writing.
And it's wonderful that in the end you actually give a glossary of material that you've kind of used for to take the book where it is.
Yeah.
Was the title instantaneously or instinctively the one that you settled on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was, because to me it was.
With the un in the parentheses.
Yeah, because to me the title is just all about acceptance. I'm happy in my unhappiness, or I'm whatever. It was just, to me, just felt like the right fit. There were a couple of other titles that I really liked, but this was the one that I felt was definitely the bang on description.
So there is solitude, which is you being in your room. There is you with family, and then there are relationships, and I mean like. Not just your relationship with friends, but also romantic relationships. And all of that obviously is affected because of your mental state. And were you able to find people who were compassionate enough to work with you on that.
Yeah, I was.
Were you open enough to say that in relationships, saying, you know?
I was very lucky. Absolutely, I've been very lucky to have some wonderful people in my life. But I think it's like anything; it's a learning, and it's, you know, especially when I was younger, my 20s, my early 20s were actually one of the worst phases of my depression. And that's generally also when you're figuring out who you are. There's so much happening. So obviously, when you're in relationships, when you're with people at that time, in any case, it's such a time of figuring out balances, understanding how you are, and you know. So it has taken a lot of, again, trial and error to figure out. But I feel like I have a much better handle on myself now, and understanding of myself, which then informs my relationships, my romantic relationships as well.
You know, when the book release happened, it was also a moment of emotional turmoil for your family. I mean, Alia broke down in that Barkha Dutt thing. Your dad lost his shit on, you know, at the thing. So how did you deal with that? I mean, did you just come back home and said, "Oh, it's dad," you know, or did
But it is dad. You just like, okay, it had to happen now somewhere. Like, it was going to happen. Everybody knows, and everyone that we spoke to after the book launch was like, you know, it was so real, because my father's also the same way. You know, it's such a dad moment he just had on stage. So we're all, it's Mahesh Bhatt. It's what you get. Part and parcel of Mahesh Bhatt is you get a little bit of these very passionate. I will say outbursts, for want of a better word.
And with Alia, I mean, your soul sisters, apart from being real sisters, so it didn't come up after the thing. It just happened. One of those things.
No. I mean, we talked about it. I mean, the first thing that she said to me after was, "I'm so sorry I cried," because now it's going to become about how I cried. And I was like, no, you can't. Now the whole point of this is to be authentic, and if authentic is you crying, that's fine. That's you crying. It can't. You know, you can't. The whole point is not to go and censor and. You know, that's how she felt, and it's a very real thing. It's one of the things I've realized also, the guilt or the fear of family members dealing with you know, their family members' depression is very real.
Yeah, like she said, I didn't even know she was going through all
exactly
this.
It's very real, and so that's an important facet of the conversation to bring to light as well, because the depression is not just about the depressed. It's about the people that that love you, about the people the people that are dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's a very important aspect of the conversation is her response, my father's response, my mother's response, whatever those responses are.
Okay, last few questions before we wrap. Is there a concert that you went to that you said, wow, you know, any concert?
Red Hot
Here
Chili
or
Peppers.
above? Where did you see them?
I saw them in Birmingham. They are my, when I say all-time favorite band, I mean like all-time favorite to the point that, so I went to Birmingham by myself because I found out they were playing. I wept while I was booking the tickets. I wept in the train on the way to Birmingham. When I entered the stadium, I wept. And I wept the entire time they were on stage. So they are my all-time favorite, and it was one of the best concerts I've ever seen.
You're not allowed to say "Give It Away" or "Under the Bridge," which are very cliched answers. But what would your favorite track be other than these?
God,
like mine is
so
"Adventures of Rain
many.
Dance Maggie."
Okay, I like Adventures.
And Californication.
I like, so Stadium Arcadium, a lot of the songs, because Stadium Arcadium is a very popular, it's a very nice, rounded, popular, you know, album. But God, there are so many. By the Way, Can't Stop, anything on By the Way on the album, anything, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, that whole album also, Mother's Milk, that everything. I can't choose, it's too hard.
Is there a drive that you went to and you said, wow? I mean, it could be anything. Could be the Great Ocean Road, could be Bombay to Goa. The drive.
I mean, I used to, when my friends and I were younger, we used to do nightly drives. We used to pick everyone, you start in Juhu and pick everyone up along the way and drive down Burley Seaface. And that was a thing that we would do, and we had a ritual where we put on the Dropkick Murphys. Shipping up to Boston, we played that song, and then we would drive up and down the road. That's what we did. So that, for me, those are very lovely memories that I have.
Super stuff. Your dad is really a bundle of contradictions, I have to say this. I mean, he talks about being a rationalist right now, and then you look at his life, which is full of emotion.
Can you imagine what my life is like with him on a day-to-day basis? Can you imagine what I have to deal with?
But your mom is the one who is closest to your condition, isn't it? I mean, or she's the one who spurred you on.
So my mom, I think, was the one who she's the one who saw me on a day-to-day basis. She saw the ways it affected me on a day-to-day basis. I would not leave my room. She was home to see all of that. My dad wasn't there. So my mom was the one who sort of took charge of the situation, and she's the one who made sure that I started going to therapy and I saw a doctor and all of that. My dad, I think, is close in the sense that he has an emotional resonance with what I was going through.
And what a wonderful second innings your mom is having in terms of her roles
Oh my
and things
God,
like that.
she
How
is
cool.
so. I cannot explain to you how busy she is. I've not seen her in months because she's working more than Alia at this point.
She's doing everything: theatre, web series, this, that.
She's killing it right
She's
now, and
killing
I'm so absolutely happy for her. And I told my dad also, I was like, it's very good. See, now you were working at one point and she was home. Now you stay home, let her work.
And Alia seems to be the most sorted amongst all of you. When I read the book, it just comes that
Yeah.
it's almost as though she's born with wisdom.
No, she is. That's the thing. She's a remarkably calm and wise person. I always
I remember,
marvel.
it's like deja vu. Karan Johar bringing Alia and Varun and Sid into studio for their first ever interview. And I said, this one's the wise one. It looks as though she's already done 10 films, and Karan Johar said, you're right.
But she really
because
is.
Sid was doing his dude routine and Varun was the excited kid, and she was just the wise one, and she's turned out to be the wise one.
No, but she is. It's amazing and remarkable how she's handled, all the things that life has brought her. It's not really easy to navigate fame, and it blows my mind how impeccably she's done that. She's got such a strong head on her shoulders, and she's really she always says the only place I act is in front of the camera, and that's true.
Super stuff. I have to send a WhatsApp picture of you and me to her now.
Absolutely.
Shaheen, thank you very much.
Thank you so
From me,
much.
Hrishi K, and everybody at Radio 1, thank you for rolling by. Thank you for talking about issues which, are so close to your heart. And like I said, I love the book. And everybody who's listening, go pick it up. It's on all online as well as on-ground stores. Shaheen Bhatt's book. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.